was about a unicorn, maybe it would be good right now to ground us back in some science, right? Let's talk about some important scientific concepts. First, we'll chat about quantum mechanics, and then we'll move on to Einstein's theory of relativity, and then perhaps we'll throw in some string theory. Have I lost anyone yet? I'm not a scientist, I'm not. This stuff is fascinating, but I don't actually understand all of it. And I'm sure there are some people in our fellowships here with us today who would be able to teach me. But what I do understand is that quantum mechanics and the theory of relativity and string theory and a whole bunch of other scientific theories have all been used in physicists' searches to find what they call a theory of everything. One unified scientific theory that can explain how the world works, or why things happen the way they do. These have all been a part of efforts to find one solid truth, a truth with a capital T. Einstein himself spent years and years chasing a theory that worked like this, a theory of everything. And it proved to be a lot more elusive than he anticipated. There's this letter that he wrote in 1938 that I love, where he was talking about his research, and he's talking about his apprentices. And he says, "Most of my intellectual offspring end up very young in the graveyard of disappointed hopes." Apparently, he was still puzzling over nailing down this unifying theory while he was on his deathbed. And he's not the only one. Tons of other scientists have made it their mission to discover a theory of everything as well. In the mid-20th century, people thought they'd found it with what they call the Standard Model. But the Standard Model wasn't able to account for the force of gravity. So because of that, it's actually come to be called a theory of almost everything. But scientists after scientists, from Stephen Hawking to Marcelo Gleiser, who we heard from in our reading today, scientists after scientists are finding that this theory of everything is an impossible endeavor. A theory of everything will never be within reach, they say, because human descriptions of reality are always going to be incomplete. We simply can't know everything. And that's kind of frustrating, but it's also kind of cool and exciting, right? In Unitarian Universalism, we tend to love science. I don't think I have met a UU who does not have a strong appreciation for the field of science. And here is yet another opportunity for us to learn from what science has to offer, right? If we really think about it, science's story about the quest for a theory of everything points to something really, really profoundly true and important about the concept of truth. We simply can't know everything. We simply can't uncover an all-encompassing truth with a capital T. Just as a theory of everything is proving to be impossible, quantum mechanics fails when applied to matters of relativity. Relativity fails when applied to matters of quantum mechanics. Gravity throws a wrench in the Standard Model. Perhaps the same can be said for truth in general. Perhaps there's no one model for truth that always works and applies to everyone. Now, I want to be clear. Nowadays, with the internet and the rhetoric of our country's current administration, it's becoming more and more important for us to be able to weed out things that are not true. To weed out lies and propaganda and harmful points of view by using our brains and our UU values to point us towards what is actually real. But we must also acknowledge that we ourselves may not have the full truth. That we have so much to learn about the world by listening to truths that may sound a little different from our own. It's become pretty popular since the age of enlightenment for many of us in our culture to consider reason and rationality and logic as our own theories of everything when it comes to truth. This idea that reason and rationality and logic lead us toward one objective truth. But if we remember what scientists tell us, human descriptions of reality will always be incomplete. The truth that we may see as the objective truth is likely not the whole picture. Reason and rationality and logic may be useful parts of the picture, like quantum mechanics. But perhaps they don't apply when truth is provided by emotions or feelings, just like quantum mechanics doesn't apply when concerning matters of relativity. Or perhaps we can't see how the ways we use reason and rationality and logic might be shaped by our very own context or beliefs or desires or biases. Many people working in the fields of psychology and spirituality emphasize that there are actually three centers of intelligence: the mind, the heart, and the body. Three different, equally valuable ways of knowing, and all three are remarkably connected in ways that we don't yet understand. But three different, equally real sources of truth. In our context of the US, I would argue that we're taught to prioritize the mind, right? Thinking, or what we consider to be rational. We're taught to devalue everything else. We're taught that the mind and intellect and our ability to reason is most important, and they are important. But perhaps none of these, perhaps not only the mind or only the heart or only the body, perhaps none of these can be a theory of everything. Perhaps they need each other to better understand what is true, with an acknowledgement that there are times when no one thing can be true for everyone, no matter how objective we might think that truth is. I think this can be especially difficult in Unitarian Universalism, where our faith strives to be a home for everyone who shares our values, our important and life-giving values. But shared values may not always translate to shared truths. And perhaps we need to think about how to intentionally make room for that in our faith-giving community, I mean, maybe you hear yourself in one of these truths. I came to this fellowship because I am looking for a community where discussing big questions from an atheistic perspective is welcome. I came to this fellowship because it alivens my spirit and makes room for my spiritual journey. I came to this fellowship because I grew up in a church that harmed me, and I am looking for healing. I came to this fellowship because the values of this faith are a part of God. I came to this fellowship because I am in an interfaith marriage and I want to be able to worship together as a family. I came to this fellowship because it's a place that helps me raise my kids to be good people. I came to this fellowship because social justice is a spiritual responsibility. I don't know why I'm here, but this fellowship has something that I'm looking for. All of these are truths. None of these falls into a theory of everything. Let's keep going. Perhaps you hear yourself in one of these truths. Religion is divisive. Religion is unifying. The civil rights movement was a religious movement. Religion is a category defined and weaponized by Western colonialism. Religion brings depth, breadth, and height to the human experience. The word God has too much baggage. No one means the same thing when they're talking about God. The God I hear about from evangelical Christianity is not the God I know. There is no God. God is love. All of these are truths. And people logging into UU services like ours every week hold many variations of these truths. And they are justified and they are valid, but none of these falls into a theory of everything. All of these truths are products of different contexts, different viewpoints, different ways of making meaning in the world, different definitions of words, different ways that our brains and our hearts and our bodies work together. None of them have the whole picture. So as we embrace each other in community, let us intentionally make space for those truths that may look a little different from our own. May it be so, and amen.